Hello friends, welcome to another video of Zeta Axis, and today we will discuss composition of atmosphere, that is what are the gases which form our atmosphere. So let's see what is atmosphere. Atmosphere is a thick envelope of gases and suspended particles surrounding our earth, and they are held by the gravitational force. So here you can see this is the atmosphere. This is a ball of gases which is surrounding our earth, and it is held to our earth by the gravitational force. Now what does atmosphere includes? So it includes mixture of gases. The first thing that comes to our mind is gases. So it consists of mixture of gases. We have carbon dioxide, oxygen, nitrogen and many other gases. Then there are suspended solid particles. So atmosphere also has solid particles like smoke, dust particles, ice particles. So all these particles are thrown up in the atmosphere and they are suspended in our atmosphere. Similarly, we have suspended liquid droplets like clouds. We can see that atmosphere consists of gases, solid particles and liquid droplets. Now this is the composition of our atmosphere. Nitrogen is around 78%, oxygen is around 21%, argon is around 1%. Rest all are trace gases because they are present in very little amount. We are not including water vapor and aerosols in this because the composition or the concentration of water vapor and aerosols varies a lot. You will see that they are concentrated near equator, but their amount decreases as we move away from the equator. Now if you want to remember the order of concentration of these gases, you can just use this mnemonic. You can use this, that no AC never heats my knife handle, where N indicates nitrogen, O indicates oxygen, A for argon, C for carbon dioxide, N for neon, He for helium, M for methane, K for kryptonite and H for hydrogen. So by remembering this single line, you will be able to remember all the gases in the sequence of their concentration in our atmosphere. So what is a permanent gas and what is variable gas? All the gases in our atmosphere are mainly divided into two types, permanent and variable. Now permanent gases are those gases which has remained constant for a very long period of time. If we see oxygen and nitrogen in our atmosphere, then for almost 1 billion years their concentration in our atmosphere is same. Therefore their proportion in the atmosphere is constant for a very long time. That is why they are called permanent gases. But if we see variable gases, then their concentration changes in small period of time. Here we can see the example of carbon dioxide. You can see that how much its concentration has varied for over 800 years, and now the concentration has increased to this point. So we can see that now the concentration is around 4, that is 0.04%. So let's see what makes a gas permanent or variable. We know that gases whose concentration has remained constant for a very long period of duration, we call them permanent gases, and gases whose concentration varies throughout the time or for a short interval of time its concentration keeps on changing. This is called variable gas. But what are the factors which make a gas permanent or variable? The first is inertness or reactivity. So if a gas is inert, that is it does not react so easily, then it is bound to have a long life in our atmosphere, like nitrogen. Nitrogen has very low reactivity. It is an inert gas. Therefore, it has a very long life in our atmosphere, and therefore the concentration of nitrogen is constant for a very long time. Now if a gas is reactive, then it will react with other elements in the atmosphere and it will be removed from the atmosphere. Therefore you will see that the concentration of these kind of gases, that is reactive gases, is not constant for a very long period. A gas, if it is soluble in water, then it will be removed by rainfall. So you see that the carbon dioxide is soluble in water. It forms carbonic acid and therefore it gets easily removed from the atmosphere. We see if there are stable sources and sinks. So source are those factors which add gas to the atmosphere. So anything which add gas to the atmosphere is called a source, and sink is anything which removes a gas from the atmosphere. So if any gas has a stable source and stable sink, that is they have a stable supply and stable removal mechanism, then they are bound to have a normal concentration or fixed concentration for a very long period. If a gas's source increases or decreases, or if its sinks increases or decreases, then those gases are bound to have fluctuations in their concentration. Then the residence time of a gas. For a gas to have a constant concentration, its residence time should be very long. If its residence time in our atmosphere is less, then there will be fluctuations in the concentration of these gases. Now here are permanent gases. All the gases except these three gases are called variable gases. So nitrogen, oxygen and argon are our permanent gases, and rest all are variable gases. Now let's see nitrogen gas. Nitrogen is 78.08% of our total atmosphere. Here we will see the sources of nitrogen, that is those factors which add nitrogen to our atmosphere. These are the natural sources and these are the man-made sources. The first important source is volcanoes. Here when the volcanoes emit, they give out a lot of smoke and other particles. So this smoke contains small fractions of nitrogen. Similarly, when any living organism it dies, the biomass of those living organisms is decomposed, and in this decomposition process nitrogen as well as other elements is released to the atmosphere. So this process also adds nitrogen to the atmosphere. Then there are denitrifying bacteria in the soil. So in the soil there are certain bacteria like Pseudomonas and Paracoccus. So these bacteria, they take nitrogen in the soil and they convert them into nitrogen gas. So this is called denitrification process, and the bacteria is called denitrifying bacteria. Now the man-made sources are using fossil fuels. So we use fossil fuels on our gases or in our factories, and it emits nitrogen in small fractions in the atmosphere. After that we use a large amount of NPK fertilizer which includes nitrogen. So when we add this NPK fertilizers to the soil, we know that there is denitrifying bacteria in the soil. Now as more nitrogen is added, the nitrogen released by the denitrification process also increases, and therefore we see that this process of adding nitrogen as fertilizer to the soils increases emission of nitrogen in the atmosphere. And one more important source is the industries. Some of the industries, they do some processes through which nitrogen is released in the atmosphere. Now let's see some of the important things of nitrogen. We know that nitrogen is an inert gas and it will not react with other elements in the atmosphere. But when lightning occurs, a lot of heat is produced, and this heat breaks down the nitrogen molecule, and therefore this molecule will then react with other elements in the atmosphere which can be removed from the atmosphere. Therefore lightning plays a significant role in removal of nitrogen from the atmosphere. Similarly, there are certain bacteria which live on root nodules of plants. Here you can see root nodules. These are root nodules, and there are certain lumps over here. In these there are certain bacteria like rhizobium. They live on these root nodules, and they will convert the nitrogen from the atmosphere into such forms which can be absorbed by these plants. So this also removes nitrogen from the atmosphere. Now there are certain free living bacteria in the soil. Azotobacter is an example of this. These bacteria, they again take up the nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it in a form which is soluble or dissolvable in the soil. So these bacteria are called nitrifying bacteria. So they do the process opposite of denitrifying, which was done by Pseudomonas. So let's see some of the important factors of nitrogen. Nitrogen, as we know, is an inert gas. Therefore it does not react easily, and therefore it has a very long life. Nitrogen is also essential for living organisms because it helps in growth. It is also present in amino acids. Then DNA and RNA also include nitrogen. Nitrogen also helps in transferring energy within our cells in the form of ATP. Now, why is nitrogen fixation important? We have seen that there are certain bacteria on the root nodules or in the soil which remove nitrogen from the atmosphere. The reason is that we as animals cannot directly consume nitrogen. We cannot consume the nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. So this nitrogen must be first fixed. It is fixed by bacteria or lightning. This bacteria can be free living bacteria, or it can be a bacteria living on the root nodules like rhizobium. When they are added to the soil, then from the soil it is absorbed by the plants, and once the plants have absorbed it, then we consume it from the plants. So animals, all the animals, they consume nitrogen from the plants. So directly no animal, or in fact most of the animals, cannot absorb nitrogen from the atmosphere. Therefore they have to depend on plants. Oxygen. Oxygen is around 21% in our atmosphere. And the main source of oxygen is photosynthesis. Plants and trees on land and algae and other marine plants in our sea, they are the major source of oxygen. In fact, the amount of oxygen added by the algae and marine plants is much higher compared to the oxygen added by plants and trees on land. So marine biosphere is the biggest producer of oxygen. So what are the major sinks of oxygen? We have seen the sources of oxygen. So what are the major sinks? Combustion. Anything which we burn or any decomposition, it occurs only with oxygen. So oxygen is consumed. So if you burn anything, oxygen is consumed, that is, it is removed from the atmosphere. Absorption in sea. Water also absorbs oxygen, and because of it, the animals living in the ocean can breathe. So oxygen is also absorbed by sea. And lastly, respiration. We all respire, we all take oxygen inside and remove carbon dioxide. So this process of respiration also consumes oxygen. Argon. Argon is also an important permanent gas, and it is a noble and inert gas, and it is derived from the decay of potassium-40 in Earth's crust. So basically it is emitted by a radioactive process in our rocks, and it is released in very small fraction. Therefore you see that argon is present in a small fraction in our atmosphere. Now let's see the variable gases. Gases found in small amounts within the atmosphere whose concentration varies with time is called a variable gas. And all gases other than nitrogen, oxygen and argon are called variable gases. So all these are examples of variable gases, except these particles. These are solid particles. So you can see here the amount or proportion of these gases and their average lifetime in the atmosphere. You can see that the average amount of these gases is very less in our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide and water vapor only make some significant amount. Other than that, all these variable gases are present in very small fraction. So water vapor, it is around 0 to 4% in our atmosphere. Water vapor is not exactly clouds and fog, but water vapor which are in gaseous state. Clouds and fog are in liquid state. So water vapor does not just consist of fog and clouds, but they are all the water vapor which is there in our winds. And the source of this water vapor in our atmosphere is hydrological cycle. That is the process of evaporation, that is water is evaporated, it is the water vapor is added in our atmosphere. Condensation, by the process of which clouds are formed, and then precipitation, the process by which rainfall occurs. So this cycle is continuous, and we see that because of evaporation, water vapor is added to the atmosphere. Now, the man-made activities have very less impact on the concentration of water vapor. Therefore, when we talk about greenhouse gas effect, we do not generally concentrate on water vapor. Water vapor is mainly concentrated near the equator because here there is more heat, and because of more heat there is more evaporation. If you go in the higher latitudes, the air is cooler, the water is cooler, and the sunlight is not that much to cause water evaporation. Therefore, you will see that the concentration of water vapor decreases as we move away from the tropical zone. Even when we move higher up in the sky, we will see that the concentration of water vapor decreases. In fact, 99% of the water vapor is there in troposphere. Now let's see what are the important roles of water vapor in our atmosphere. Rainfall, clouds and fog formation are some of the major functions of water vapor. Rainfall is very important for life on Earth. In some parts, life depends on water which it gets from the rainfall. Therefore, rainfall is a very important process. Moreover, water vapor also acts as a greenhouse gas. You can see here that this section represents the radiation coming from sun. This section represents radiation which is emitted by our Earth, and we can see that water vapor absorbs all these radiations. It absorbs the radiation coming from the sun, it absorbs radiation emitted by Earth, and therefore it is the most effective greenhouse gas. Now water vapor also helps in transferring heat from lower atmosphere to upper atmosphere. Here we can see that when we heat a ball of water, you will see that its temperature increases. But when we reach 100 degrees Celsius, that is the boiling point of water, you will see that we can continue supplying heat to it, but the temperature will not increase. Only to a certain point after which the temperature will increase. So this much amount of energy, heat energy, is supplied to the water for converting the state of water. This is called latent heat of vaporization. That is, this heat is provided to convert the state of water from liquid to vapor. So when evaporation occurs in the sea, this latent heat is absorbed by the water for its state to be converted from liquid to gaseous state. But now when this water goes up, it starts to condense. Here you can see that now when we cool this vapor, you will see that again the temperature will not decrease over here, but heat is released. Why? Because this heat is released for converting the vapor into water. This is again called latent heat of vaporization. So you see, when the clouds are formed, it will release this latent heat of vaporization in the atmosphere. So you can see that this heat was absorbed in the lower atmosphere, and then when the clouds were formed in the upper part of the atmosphere, this heat was released. So you can see that there is a transfer of heat from lower atmosphere to higher atmosphere in the form of latent heat of vaporization. Now this latent heat, it plays a very important role in the formation of cyclones. Therefore you will see that water vapor is a very important part of cyclones. In fact, the cyclones, they are not able to sustain once they enter the land because the supply of water level ends. Therefore, this water vapor plays a very important role in fueling the cyclones and other weather phenomena. So here we have listed the key features of the water vapor which we have discussed. It helps in formation of rainfall, cloud and fog. It is also most effective greenhouse gas, that is, it reduces the difference in temperature between night and day. It releases latent heat on condensation, so it helps in fueling cyclones and other weather systems, both tropical and extratropical cyclones. Helps in transferring heat from lower atmosphere to higher atmosphere. We have seen that latent heat of vaporization is absorbed in the lower atmosphere, and when it goes up and forms clouds, this latent heat of vaporization is released in the upper atmosphere. Next we will see carbon dioxide. Now carbon dioxide proportion varies a little bit. It can be from 0.036 to 0.04%. Now here we will discuss about distribution of carbon on Earth. Now remember, this is distribution of carbon and not carbon dioxide, but it is important to show you that all the rocks or most of the sedimentary rocks on the surface, they have carbon in them. And when these sedimentary rocks are made to react, they will release this carbon which will form carbon dioxide. So these rocks, they act as a sink for carbon dioxide. They absorb carbon from the atmosphere. When rain comes, the carbon dioxide dissolves in this rain and forms carbonic acid. Those carbonic acid reacts with the rocks to form these kind of rocks. They are absorbed by the rocks, and therefore we see that these act as a sink for carbon dioxide. Now we see that oceans have a higher proportion of carbon dioxide compared to atmosphere, and we see that biomass also have carbon. So you can see here that the proportion of carbon dioxide in ocean is greater than the proportion of carbon dioxide in atmosphere. So what are the major sources of carbon dioxide? The first is volcanoes. Volcanoes, when they erupt, they give carbon dioxide. Then respiration. We take in oxygen, we give out carbon dioxide. So this acts as a source in the atmosphere. We are adding carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Therefore, it is a source of carbon dioxide. Then there are fossil fuels. We burn the fossil fuels, we give out carbon dioxide. Then there is again the process of combustion. When we burn anything, we burn biomass or we burn any other item, we will release carbon dioxide. And then there are industries which release carbon dioxide directly in the atmosphere. Now what are the major sinks? That is, what are the processes or factors which absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? So the first is the process of photosynthesis. We all know that plants, during the process of photosynthesis, they will take out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, fix it and form food. Absorption in sea. We know that acidification of sea occurs. Sea absorbs carbon dioxide. Then there is absorption in rocks. We have seen that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it gets dissolved in the rain. It forms carbonic acid. This carbonic acid, when comes down to the surface of Earth, it reacts with the rock and forms and gets absorbed in those rocks. Therefore, these rocks act as a sink for carbon dioxide. Now here are the radiations which are emitted by sun and come to our earth, and these are the radiations which our earth emits. We can see that carbon dioxide absorbs most efficiently in the radiations which are emitted by our earth. It does absorb some of the radiation which comes from sun, but the most significant part of the radiation it absorbs is released by the earth. Now here we can see the concentration of carbon dioxide in last 800 years. We can see that there is a very great fluctuations in its concentration, but now the concentration of carbon dioxide has reached over here, and that is why it is a very big concern for all of us. We will discuss this in great detail in greenhouse gases. Now this is the variation in concentration of carbon dioxide on annual basis. So you can see that even on annual basis there is a fluctuation in the concentration of carbon dioxide. You can see that it increases, then decreases, increases and decreases. This is called Keeling curve, based on the scientist who discovered this. Now the reason for this kind of increase and decrease annually is that in the winters in northern hemisphere mostly there is land mass. We know that northern hemisphere has a lot of land mass, and trees in winter shed their leaves, therefore low photosynthesis, therefore low amount of carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere. Therefore there is large amount of carbon dioxide in the winter in our earth. So we can see that the concentration increases and decreases annually. So we have seen the important roles of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. The first is acting as a greenhouse gas, and the second is the process of photosynthesis. Now let's see methane. Methane is a very tiny fraction of all the gases in our atmosphere, but it plays a very important role. In fact, it is one of the major concerns for greenhouse gases. It also plays an important role in forming stratospheric clouds in Antarctica, which causes depletion of ozone. Now here in this chart we can see different sources of emission of methane. We can see that most of the methane is released by wetlands, then agriculture fields, then livestock, oil and gas exploration, biomass burning, landfills. Now in some of the charts you will see that agriculture is at the top. The reason is that they will combine livestock and agriculture and certain other fields from others, and thus it will make this go up. And they will also divide wetlands into natural wetlands and man-made wetlands. Then the proportion of wetland will come down. So basically it will depend how the chart is prepared and what fields are considered independently. Even then, agriculture is a very important emitter of methane in our atmosphere. So let's see some of the sources of emission of methane in our atmosphere. So we will start with natural sources. So here are wetlands, and we can see that these wetlands are clogged with water. Now many animals or many plants which are buried, they are forced to undergo anaerobic respiration. Moreover, decomposition of biomass which is buried in this water, it will also occur through anaerobic decomposition. Therefore it will release large amount of methane in the atmosphere. Even when the water is drained out, the biomass which remains, it by the process of methogenesis will release methane in the atmosphere. Therefore these kind of swamps, wetland or marshes, there are natural sources of emission of methane in the atmosphere. Then we see termites. Termites also emit methane. In the stomach of the termite there are certain organisms. These organisms help in digestion of plants, but when they try to digest this plant they will emit methane. So by the digestive tract of these termites, this methane is released in the atmosphere. Therefore these termite colonies are also a big source of methane to our atmosphere. Now the next important source is methane hydrates. On the sea floor, due to cool temperature and heavy pressure, we see that methane is in the form of solid. When we try to extract them or try to bring them up, they are converted into gaseous form and it is absorbed by the atmosphere. So we see that this is also a source of methane in the atmosphere. Permafrost. So permafrost are frosts which are there for a very long time, but because of their melting, the biomass which was deposited under them is exposed to the atmosphere, and these biomass, when they are exposed, they will undergo a process of methanogenesis and they will release methane to the atmosphere. So the global warming causing melting of snow in the polar regions could also increase the amount of methane in the atmosphere because of this process of methanogenesis. Now, what are the man-made sources? So this is agricultural land. So you can see here that there is water over here and a lot of biomass is submerged under this water. Now this biomass, when decomposed, it will be decomposed by the process of anaerobic decomposition and it will release a lot of methane in the atmosphere. So these agricultural lands also release a lot of methane. Now because this agriculture is done for human, therefore it is considered a man-made effect. Similarly, the livestock which humans have, like cows or buffaloes, they also have a certain organisms in their stomach which help in absorbing plants. But when they try to digest plants, they emit methane. So this methane through their digestive tract is released in the atmosphere. Therefore, livestock also emits methane. Now, this livestock is kept by humans for their own benefits. Therefore, this is also a man-made source of methane. The next man-made source of methane is fossil fuel extraction. In the process of extracting fossil fuel, there is also some methane with it. But it is not possible to extract those methane economically. Therefore, most of the companies, they burn it by a process called flaring. So this process also releases methane in the atmosphere. Then landfills. We all know in the cities garbage is collected and dumped in one place, which is called landfills. Now in these landfills, when the layer becomes higher, you will see that the amount of oxygen in the lower layers is less. And therefore, whatever biomass is over there, it will undergo anaerobic decomposition and we will get methane in the atmosphere. Biomass burning also releases methane. When plants or trees, they are burned by natural process or by human process, the incomplete combustion which occurs over here, that will emit methane in the atmosphere. So these kind of fires also emit a lot of methane and add to the concentration of methane in our atmosphere. Here we have listed all the major sources of methane that we have just discussed. We have already discussed those points, so we are not going to discuss it again, but you can list it from here. Now let's see what are the sinks of methane, that is, which are the processes which remove methane from the atmosphere. So there are mainly two reactions which remove methane from the atmosphere. The first is methane reacting with a hydroxyl radical within the troposphere to form carbon dioxide and water vapor. So this reaction adds water vapor to the atmosphere. Now when this reaction occurs in stratosphere, the water vapor which is released, it is used for forming stratospheric clouds, which finally depletes ozone in our Antarctica and other polar regions. Then there is a second reaction, methane chlorine in the presence of sunlight, and they form chloromethane and HCl. So this process also removes methane from the atmosphere. There are also certain bacteria in the soil which fix methane. That is, they will take methane from the atmosphere and fix it in a form which is dissolved or soluble in the soils. So here you can see the major sinks of methane which we have discussed. The concentration of methane you can see here for 8 lakh years. You can see that it was almost over here, but now in the recent history it has increased to this level. So there is almost 4-fold increase in the concentration of methane in our atmosphere. Now let's see ozone. Ozone forms a very small fraction of our atmosphere, but it is a very important gas because it helps us protect from the UV rays. We know that the ozone has maximum concentration in stratosphere, but some amount of ozone is present in our troposphere. In stratosphere, it absorbs UV rays. You can see here that this ozone layer, it absorbs UV rays which are coming here. UVC rays are the most energetic and most harmful ultraviolet rays. So this ozone layer will absorb it. UVB rays are also a little harmful, and this ozone will absorb a part of this UVB rays. This ozone does not absorb UVA rays. The ozone which is there in the troposphere, it acts as a pollutant and it is also responsible for photochemical smog. Now here in this image we can see formation of ozone holes in our Arctic region. Similar ozone holes are also formed in over Antarctica and even over Tibetan regions. We have discussed the process of this ozone hole formation in another video. Here we have listed down all that we have discussed about ozone. We have a separate video discussing stratospheric ozone and tropospheric ozone. The link will be available in the description. So let's see what are aerosols. Now aerosols are tiny liquid droplets or tiny solid particles, and they are so small that they remain suspended in the air. They are thrown up in the air, and because they are so small and so light that they do not come quickly to the surface, but they remain floating in the atmosphere. Here we see smoke, ice crystals, sea salt crystal, dust, volcanic emission and industrial pollution as aerosols. So what are the major sources of aerosols in our atmosphere? Here we can see volcanoes. When volcanoes explode, they send out a lot of particles, tiny particles. So these tiny particles are called aerosols, and they remain suspended in the air. Similarly, industries, their combustion, there is partial combustion which releases black carbon in the atmosphere, and this black carbon remains suspended in the atmosphere and it becomes a aerosol. Similarly, dust storms, they throw a lot of dust particles in the atmosphere which are suspended in the atmosphere. Then there are waves from our oceans. They also throw up a lot of salt particles or salt crystals in the atmosphere which is suspended in the atmosphere. So this is our take on composition of gases in our atmosphere, and if you like our video, then please like, subscribe and share this video, and please follow us on our social media handles. Thank you.